Hey, it's Professor Gould, and today we're going to talk about meiosis. Now, we already learned mitosis. Meiosis is a similar but different process. So mitosis happens in what we call somatic cells. That is all the cells that make up the body. Now, not all the cells in the body or in any organism do mitosis. We talked before about how some cells do mitosis and some don't. But at any rate, all of those are the somatic cells, and they're the ones that generally do mitosis. Meiosis only happens in very specialized cells, and those are the cells in the ovaries and the testes that create gametes. Gametes is our general word for sex cells. In a male, meiosis creates sperm. That's the male gamete. In a female, meiosis creates eggs. That's the female gamete. And yes, this also happens in plants. Plants do sexual reproduction, meaning that they reproduce by making sperm and eggs. They do have ovaries. They don't have testes. They have an anther where the sperm develops. So now, before I go further, and we're going to talk more about this when we talk about sexual reproduction, but I do want to just say a word about I'm going to use these terms male and female. And that is because the biological definition of male is an organism that makes sperm. A biological definition of female is an organism that makes eggs. That does not mean that those are the only two options available. And that absolutely does not mean that those are the only two phenotypes or physical types that we see in humans. There are many people who have a wide range of physical characteristics that are male and female. There are some people who are born intersex, meaning that they have some male genitalia and some female. It's very complicated. We're going to talk about it when we talk about sexual reproduction. So I just wanted to say that we are going to be using male and female because those are the biological terms, but this is not an exhaustive list of all of the possibilities in the natural world. Okay. You remember that mitosis is where a cell duplicates itself. So we start with one cell, we end up with two cells that are exactly the same as each other, including having all the same DNA. Meiosis is going to start with one cell, but it's going to create four cells, and each of those cells have half of the DNA of the original cell. Okay, so we're not making an exact copy. And that's one of the things that makes meiosis really powerful from an evolutionary standpoint. And we're going to talk about some of that at the end. All right, so cells that do meiosis are diploid. Plants mess this up, but we're just going to talk about diploid and haploid. Some plants are like tetraploid. Diploid means you have two of each chromosome. Some plants have four of each chromosome, tetraploid, or six of each chromosome, hexaploid, or eight of each chromosome, octoploid, because plants are wacky. Okay, anyway, we're just going to use diploid and haploid for this lecture. So diploid means having two of each chromosome. Haploid means having one of each chromosome. So all of the somatic cells in your body and in most animals and plants. I'm trying to think if there are any animals that have haploid cells. I know there are some plants that have haploid cells, but complicated. Generally speaking, adult organisms are diploid. The sex cells, the gametes, are haploid. Meiosis, like I said, is going to start with one, end up with four haploid cells. Start one diploid to four haploid. Okay. A new organism is created when those two haploid cells, an egg and a sperm, fuse together. That process is called fertilization, and the cell that is produced is called a zygote, and that is a diploid cell. You started out as a zygote when egg fused with sperm. All right, so here's a general multicellular animal and plant life cycle. We start with a diploid adult. The male and female both do meiosis and create haploid gametes, an egg and a sperm. Those two meet and fuse. That's fertilization. That creates a zygote. That zygote then starts to undergo mitosis and eventually grows into an adult capable of doing meiosis. So that's the general multicellular life cycle. So meiosis is going to take the number of chromosomes and cut it in half. And just like we don't do mitosis willy-nilly, meiosis is going to be really organized. And it's going to have two main phases. The first, of course, before we start that, we have to do interphase, where, of course, the homologous chromosomes are going to duplicate their DNA. Then we've got meiosis 1. I know we have two big parts of meiosis. The first one is called meiosis 1. The second one is called, wait for it, meiosis 2. In meiosis 1, we're going to separate the homologous chromosomes. So we're going to separate the homologous pair. But notice that the sister chromatids stay together. The sister chromatids get separated in meiosis 2. So meiosis 2 is a lot like mitosis, where we take the chromosome, separate the sister chromatids. All right. Interphase in meiosis is exactly the same as it is in mitosis. Doesn't matter what the cell is going to end up doing when it gets to M phase. The cell builds up energy, duplicates its chromosomes, duplicates the centrosomes, duplicates the organelles, all of that stuff. All of that happens in interphase. And meiosis is going to proceed exactly the same in plants and animals, just like mitosis. Until we get to telophase, everything is exactly the same in plants and animals. The only difference is in how the cells separate to make two new cells. In animals, of course, we're going to have a cleavage furrow, create daughter cells. In plants, they're still going to do the cell plate, cell wall thing, but then they're going to actually separate into cytokinesis. It's a little more complicated. It's actually beyond what we're going to learn for this class, okay? But just know that all of the phases for mitosis are the same for animals and plants. All of the phases for meiosis are the same for animals and plants, except for the separation of cells in cytokinesis. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and then in the next one, I'm going to show you what happens to the chromosomes during meiosis, and then we're going to talk about how meiosis affects development and evolution.